All right, so to my left are Klaus Jacob, Bill Fritz, and Jamie Rubin. Nancy Keats sends her regrets. She is one of the authors of the governor's New York City NYC 2100 report, which you can also download. She was hoping to be here, but she fell ill this morning. So you three, over you go. Again, look on your program. You'll know who these three are. They have enough experience and background to... I was going to use a terrible metaphor. I was going to say sink a ship. We don't want to sink a ship. They're highly qualified, and they're here to talk to us about what's at stake. So, who wants to go first? Klaus, why don't you go first? I don't think you need to hold it, Klaus. Won't it pick him up if he just talks? Does he have to hold the mic? Oh, he does. Klaus. Okay, that's why you're a scientist. Hold the mic. All right.
Thank you, and welcome. The experience of Sandy showed that we are both as a city, as a society, and as individuals in total risk denial. The facts in terms of projections were well known where the water would go. The probabilities, which is something that's scientifically clear but very hard to translate to the public, were known. And even the costs of such events were well known ahead of time. Yet, if this just stays in the academic and scientific and, if you like, emergency preparedness community, it will do a little to help us to plan our future and, as it has been shown, our present situation. So, what does it take? Well, first, as individuals, and then in particular in those who are in the position to make decisions for us in various levels of government, hopefully with input from communities, will have to get on board and move. Our city planning process, as it has been in the past, and I take it in the largest sense, not just the Department of City Planning, the infrastructure operators and owners, have to clearly not only look at the hazards that are known for now, but also for the projections for the rest of the century, in some cases at least, because they go out to the 2080s or the end of the century, if you like. But at that time, for instance, sea level rise will not stop just because we haven't projected it beyond. It will further accelerate. It will rise to levels that we have seen during Sandy, and those levels will be achieved at a nice sunny day in the year 2200 at least, and in 2100 on a slightly windy day. That means our city will have to look entirely different, not just in its built infrastructure, but also in its social and government infrastructure. And that's all at the moment I want to say, because we have been in denial, and that denial has to stop.
Good morning. I'm Bill Fritz, and this is going to illustrate the danger of having two geologists right after each other, because my message is exactly the same. My message is simple. Irene was a wake-up call last year. Sandy is a wake-up call this year. I've been working with an interdisciplinary team, Ellen Benemoff, who's in the audience today, Mike Kress, Flanagan and Peters, faculty at the College of Staten Island, and we've been using the Interdisciplinary High Performance Computing Center that we host for the City University of New York, and have been modeling what a storm surge would look like if we were hit with a major hurricane that just so happened to occur at high tide on the highest tides of the year with an eye track pretty much like what Sandy looked like. We've also have a database that we've shared with the Renaissance Computing Institute at the University of North Carolina, and we think we have a very, very complete database of seafloor topography and the basic geometry of the coastline that impact how the hurricanes for the whole eastern seaboard. Sea level has been rising a foot a century. 20,000 years ago, sea level was 200 feet lower than it is today. For the last 5,000 years, it's been coming up a foot every 100 years. What that means, we just saw the wonderful graphics of what Manhattan looked like in the 1600s. Sea level was 4 feet lower. The same infrastructure of New York, the tunnels would not have flooded if we had had the same storm surge with the sea level that we had in the 1600s. Sea level is continuing to rise. The worst case predictions, it may go to 2 to 5 feet a century with increased global warming. No matter where you are in that controversy, sea level is rising. The frequency and intensity of hurricanes is likely to increase. It's nature's way of balancing the hot and the cold. So we can expect more hurricanes, we can expect more, to some extent, Sandy was a minor hurricane. It was barely a hurricane. It wasn't a Category 3 hurricane like Katrina was. We had a 14-foot storm surge. It's easy to model a 20-foot storm surge. It isn't out of possibility of modeling a 38 to 40-foot storm surge. The probability goes down, but it doesn't go down to zero. Barrier islands, marshes, wetlands, coastal dune fields are nature's way of protecting the coastland. That's what absorbs. I've used the analogy that you've probably read. Those are nature's sponges that absorb the impact zone. They store the water. They mitigate against the flooding. New York Harbor, the New York metropolitan area, I think, is one of the most vulnerable areas in the entire eastern seaboard. If you think of the right angle that's caused by the shore of Long Island, the east-west shore of Long Island, the north-south shore of the Jersey coast, the way the water shallows very, very quickly, it focuses any energy from a storm surge right into the New York Harbor. The coastline of Staten Island is particularly vulnerable, but as the water surges up the New York Harbor, it's trapped by water that's being forced down Long Island Sound, and it's trapped against lower Manhattan. So the whole New York area, I think, is the most vulnerable area anywhere on the eastern seaboard because of the geometry of the coastline. As New Yorkers, we have to immediately start a serious conversation, and I think that's what we're doing here today. We're having a serious conversation of what we need to do. I'm offering a 5-point plan, and I think everything that you're going to hear about today probably in one way or another fits into that 5-point plan. I think we need to immediately protect the natural areas that we have, the marshes, the barrier islands, and we still have a lot of natural areas in the New York area. We just need to stop paving them over and protect what we have. We need to rebuild. Many areas of the world that are, the whole world is experiencing rising sea level, and so many communities are rebuilding dune fields, restoring marshes, restoring wetlands, because that mitigates against the surges. The difficult conversations are rezoning. But this is the time for us to have that conversation about rezoning, because it's the time that we have an opportunity to do something. What is the proper land use area of some of these, the A zones, the A, B, and C zones? We have to consider engineering solutions. seawalls, all of the engineering solutions. But as a geologist, I have to point out that engineering solutions always have a cost. They protect one thing at the expense of another thing. And so in that serious conversation, we have to say what it is that we're sacrificing to protect something else. And then the fifth thing we need to do is education. Why didn't people evacuate when the mayor was calling? The mayor was saying, if you're listening to me, turn off your TV and evacuate, get out of the area, or it may be too late. If we had an education of natural processes and people have evacuated, signs as simple as climb to safety in a storm surge, don't go down into your basement. In a storm surge, you don't want to go to the basement, you need to climb to safety. Those are the education things that we have to have as a major metropolitan area living on a coastline in the face of rising sea level. And in the New York area, we're going to have to be smart. We're going to have to think smart. We have a very complicated metropolitan area. There's no one of these solutions that is the answer. I don't think that there's any, magic bullet that's going to solve the problems. We're going to have to use all of these tools and probably much more as we plan for the future. Thank you.
I'm not a geologist, and apparently a critical piece of geologist training is the ability to speak off the cuff without written words, without having prepared, and do it remarkably well. I missed that part of my higher education. And I'm also extremely rule-bound, so I was told to make it 5 minutes. So what I did was I wrote out my remarks, and I can guarantee you it will take 5 minutes. So anyway, I apologize for some level of formality, but that's my nature. Some of you were probably present, and I know that when Vin hosted my boss, Sean Donovan, about a month ago at a similar forum downtown, just much closer, of course, in time to Hurricane Sandy, and Sean came and talked about what his work will be as chairman of the Federal Recovery Task Force. We're now a month later, and I guess, Vin, you could consider this a down payment on the next step of that discussion. So thank you for inviting me, all of you, to speak here this morning. I'm Jamie Rubin. I'm the New York State Director for that task force, the federal government's Hurricane Sandy Recovery Task Force. It's an honor to be with so many experts, and speaking personally and as a layman, to have a role in helping the city I grew up in recover from a disaster and plan for its future. I should say I also have a number of my colleagues from the FEMA recovery organization here in the room who do so much good work in the region. I thought what I would do is take a few minutes to describe briefly what the role of this task force will be in the recovery process, and perhaps suggest a way for this group to help us in that work. By way of background, I spent most of my career not as a geologist, but in private equity and finance, with a few years in the federal government in an entirely different capacity. I've been involved in New York City politics and policy as an amateur for many years. And since leaving my firm in May of 2012, I've been a senior fellow with the Brookings Institution Metropolitan Policy Program. So I have a passing knowledge with a broad spectrum of urban policy. About a week after Sandy hit, perhaps the end of the first week in November, Sean Donovan, who is the HUD secretary, and an old friend of mine, called me at home on a Thursday night and asked me if I would come to Washington the next day to help him plan the role that the president had asked him to take on the day before as chairman of the Sandy Recovery Task Force. The next day I was in Washington with Sean, and for the next month and a half I lived on a plane and probably more often on the Amtrak Acela. The result of this invigorating work has been several-fold. First, we put together enough of a plan for the task force that the president felt comfortable signing an executive order officially bringing this benign monster to life. And second, Sean asked me to continue my work more formally as the New York State Director of the task force, in which capacity, of course, I'm speaking to you now. So what exactly are we doing? Because that's much more interesting. It's very complicated, so I thought I would try and distill it down to a couple of things. Broadly speaking, our job is to coordinate the agencies of the federal government as they plan to spend the money that we hope Congress, in its infinite wisdom, will appropriate for the recovery of this region. As you would expect, given the breadth of Sandy's impact on New York, New Jersey, and other states, most of the agencies of the federal government are involved to greater and to lesser extents. So far, I've only identified one agency that's not really much involved, and honestly, I can't remember which one it is. It's a very small agency. Everybody's here. They're all represented on the oversight body of our task force at the cabinet level. And I have many, many dedicated colleagues from those agencies with whom I work every day, of course, including some of my FEMA friends here today. We have a number of more specific tasks, all of which must be accomplished within the next 6 to 9 months. First, or perhaps last, we will issue a report laying out a regional strategy for the federal role in the recovery from Sandy. While this will not be, as some have suggested, a spending plan or a budget for federal recovery money, it will be a guide to how we expect some of the money will be spent. Critically, the plan will be developed in partnership with all of the impacted local governments and many, many other groups and individuals, like many of you in this room, who have critical contributions to make. For despite its ominous-sounding title, the task force as an entity is supportive of local needs, not prescriptive. And that's very important. As Sean likes to say, this is the best example of the old dictum, I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help. Along the way toward the development of the report, my team here in New York will be working very closely through a variety of different means, formal and informal, to understand the impact of Sandy and to bring to bear on federal planning the best and most effective ideas available for making this region resilient in the face of what will surely be many more events like Sandy in the near future, as my colleagues here have indicated. In many ways, New York is going to be the guinea pig for a new federal approach to disaster recovery, which I think is a good thing. The Obama administration, early on, and to their credit, took a proactive approach to learning from past experience, and in particular from the long and expensive process of helping the Gulf Coast recover from Katrina. Over the course of nearly 2 years, Secretary Donovan and his colleague Janet Napolitano designed a complex but very effective process for bringing the many agencies of the government together in a region quickly after a major disaster. I'm confident that the Secretary never thought that his hometown, New York, would give him the chance to see his planning in action following a major hurricane, but it is a testament to his and Secretary Napolitano's seriousness of purpose that the plan they designed is working well so far. Our task force is fully coordinated with a large group of people here in the region from FEMA and from many other agencies whose job it is to help us assess the damage and to provide ground-level information that can inform the policymaking of the task force. Thus, while the task force itself has a working staff of perhaps 30 here and in Washington, in reality, we have almost 200 people throughout the region who are helping us. And back in Washington, we have many, many more involved throughout the involved agencies who are working closely with the task force to make sure that the federal recovery money is spent well and wisely, with an eye not only towards rebuilding, but, Klaus, towards rebuilding better in every respect. I'll close by saying a couple of words about process, which I'm sure is of interest to everyone. I think back on some of those old cartoons where the two cartoon animals are stuck on an island, and as hunger sets in, one of them starts to look like a chicken. I feel sometimes I look like a wallet. We hope that within the next couple of weeks, the Congress, and I knock on wood or something, will complete the work of appropriating a first round of money for the region and for our efforts, and that it will be at or close to the number that has been reported, which is about $50 billion. If all goes well, by the end of January, we will be in a position, working with the many agencies who have a role, to start making some preliminary announcements about spending plans and to engage deeply with this community at every level to craft a longer-term recovery. My office, which consists of me at the moment, but does seem to be getting larger, has been in close conversation with the governments of New York City and state governments, with Mayor Bloomberg and his deputy mayors, with Governor Cuomo, and of course all of his colleagues, as their planning for recovery has taken shape. This will, of course, continue. But what I very much need, and here's what I ask from you, is to get the people in this room and in others like it across the city and across the state into our process. Without your advice and counsel, without your best ideas and deep understanding of why Sandy happened, what the next Sandy might look like, and how we should prepare, our task force cannot be successful in its work. The Municipal Art Society has done a great service to the region by organizing this event and others like it, and I encourage all of you to spend at least some time at the end of today agreeing on an effective way to come forward with an offer of your help to our task force. We will certainly make it easy to do that if you will pledge to do that. So thank you again, and good luck.
Thanks, gentlemen. Just stay there because I think there'll be some questions. The last presentation and this one, thank you for giving us a sense of the seriousness of this. Just a reminder, when we start talking in the abstract about things and we see maps, we forget maybe that, there are people. This is all about people. People were affected. And I just want to take a moment and acknowledge that many, many people in this room were involved in the Sandy Aid organizations as a volunteer, as a relief worker, as a first responder. And as the day wears on, I don't want us to forget that we have lots of people here who are still coping with lots of particular personal struggles and have gone out of their way to help others. So we just want to acknowledge that this is all ultimately about people. Now, do people have questions that they might like to pose to the geology contingent here? And you can also ask a question to the mappers if you want to. Does anybody have anything they want to step off with in terms of clarifying? Can you come down here and just use that mic so that people can hear you? So questions of clarification or where you need some more expansion. Yeah, and it maybe tells who you are.
I'm Lois, Neighborhood Energy Network. In light of the coastal flooding, should we be building pipelines in these areas like Spectra and so forth?
Okay. Who wants to take that one?
Well, that is a vignette in a large picture. The question is, are we willing to reduce our energy consumption? And what is the balance between bringing energy in and being more effective in using what we already have? So I will not directly answer your question.
Sir, just one comment. A lot of that gas is intended for export.
You mean the pipelines would be bringing in, yeah.
Yeah, not local use.
So,
But I agree with your point.
okay, go ahead.
No.
Well, I mean, the question is, can New York City afford to turn its lights off in Times Square or all the skyscrapers in the night? I don't think we will do that. But I think we have to really, first on the consumption side, to look at the energy situation. And there are interesting plans to bring energy, and I'm now really focused not on the export point of your question. I'm really focusing on the regional area in terms of energy need, and there are, for instance, plans to bring in with a DC power line energy from Hydro-Quebec, which is hydropower. It would be a DC line, direct current in the Hudson, with a DC to AC converter somewhere in the Yonkers area. So that is a step in the right direction, where the overall energy planning has to be dealt with in a comprehensive way and not in little niche aspects. We need a comprehensive plan and not just looking at individual parts of the system. That would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Klaus. Bill, do you want to come in on that, or are you supporting your geological brethren there?
Yeah, my only comment would be that's part of the serious conversation that we need to have.
Right, okay,
That
over here.
I don't think there's an answer at this point, but we need to keep that in.
Okay, over here, yes.
Hi. I don't know if this is on.
It's
Okay.
on. It just tells who you are when you start.
Right, just very quickly. My name's Alice Labrie, and I'm a former U.S. Department of State Foreign Service. Hi, Mr. Rubin. And I also want to very quickly acknowledge the wonderful MAS tour by the Rockaway Waterfront Alliance, which had us on a bus tour
Yesterday.
of the Rockaway damage. So I would thank all of you who are associated with that. Professor Klaus, thank you for being there too. My comment has to do with the fact that I live on the Harlem River in Esplanade Gardens, a Mitchell-Lama co-op. We suffered extensive damage. I spent all day on the phone the day before the hurricane hit, reminding the media that, hello, we're at Harlem River, don't forget about us. Thanks to WINS AM, we were able to be in touch with CBS, who did come and cover the extensive damage that we suffered. Our assemblyman is on the case. So, Mr. Rubin, I would just like, if you would, don't forget us on the Harlem River.
Great. Okay. Over here. Yes.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Elizabeth Malone from the New York Mortgage Coalition and also a member of the Regional Catastrophic Planning Team, the Rehousing Committee. I'm concerned about the modeling that generated both the slush maps and the evacuation zones. The evacuation was called for Zone A, and the actual sandy slush went into Zone B. Who were not evacuated. As I understand the modeling, it has been based on the notion that we can only get a Category 3 hurricane this far north. And there was some discrepancy about the air pressure with the high tides and making that surge much larger than the model actually called for.
I'm happy to answer, but I'm sure I can get some help here. The slush modeling A is a relatively old model to do it. It has known deficiencies. You also have to realize that any one given storm will always deviate from what's called a probabilistic estimate, which is an average of things. Actually, it's not the average. They run hundreds of storm surge model of Category 1, fast ones, slow ones, and then they look at every point on the map, what is the highest elevation that any one of those storms has. Now, a given storm like Sandy is a specific storm with a particular wind pattern that they may not have modeled. So any given storm will always deviate from those forecasts that are based on a whole ensemble of. So you should not take those A zones or B zones, which by the way are for Category 1 hurricanes, 2, 3, and higher. Literally, I think you should take a common sense approach. You should be alert when the storm approaches, be on the TV or radio or whatever your preferred medium is, and get the actual forecast of the storm surge elevations that NOAA, the Weather Service, and others provide. That is more important than these fixed maps that were done 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I would like to agree with that. The previous panel talked about, the need for real detailed mapping because it's much more complex than you see from some of the generalized areas. For example, Professor Benemoff, who's my colleague here in the office today, has been doing those very detailed maps on Staten Island. And I think a lot of the 20-year-old maps need to be redone. Just for example, if you go to the 1891 map of Staten Island, you see that there were marshes and deep tidal channels into those marshes. Those tidal channels were filled in with sand, paved over, and built on. But if you look at the worst damage from the storm, the water was seeking those old tidal channels, and so there are areas within the A, B, the 1, 2, and 3 zones that are much more critical. We need to fully understand that, and in many tough cases, that was the reason why this particular surge extended into the B and the sea zones. And to your earlier question, yes, I wrote back in June that most people don't think of New York being in the hurricane belt. I think I can no longer say that because we've experienced it. But Category 3 and larger hurricanes are very possible this far to north. Their frequency is less, but we need to prepare for them.
So we can go to a Cat 4.
I would say yes, it's possible.
Klaus?
Nothing is impossible. It just becomes very unlikely. Okay?
Less likely. So there is a working session on mapping that Abby will be at, and others, Beth, so please go to that around, and all about the limits to models and maps. Yes, tell us who you are.
Yeah, Alan Marlis, CUNY professor. I just want to counteract the doom and gloom a bit. If you look to the mother country, old Amsterdam, and the Dutch, the whole country's underwater, and they seem to be getting along pretty well. I think expertise in engineering and commitment to a way of life against nature's currents, I think, is a possibility and a potential that we shouldn't ignore.
Gentlemen?
I guess I would respond to that because the geometry of every coastline is different, and sea level is coming up. So even in those areas with large experience of looking at those solutions, it's becoming increasingly difficult. Every year that sea level rises a little bit, it's becoming more and more difficult. But the geometry of the New York coastline is very different than the geometry of that coastline. We're sitting with a very narrow continental shelf. We're sitting with a coastline that focuses hurricane energy into a narrower and narrower part of the funnel against the New York harbor. And so I understand we should look at best practices of their solutions, but we also need to understand how our coastline and our geometry is different, and what works there may not work so well here.
I would like to add something. I had a very interesting discussion yesterday on the Rockaway tour with a Dutch fellow from the Consulate General here. And New Yorkers have actually very closely cooperated already with the Dutch. There are several very interesting reports out and more to come. The Dutch live as a nation close to the water. That's one big difference. So there is more, not an entire, but more of a consensus across the nation. We are, as I sometimes facetiously say, the disunited states, which means the two senators from Iowa will not allow us, with our two senators from New York, to spend $40–50 billion on a defense system. And why do I bring the Dutch here in that context? Because they started out after their '53 storm in building defenses, hard defenses. And then they said, oops, we'll have to let the water in and out and the fish in and out. So they made it more transparent for the water to go back and forth and only close it down during storm surges. And then they said, oops, now the sea level is rising. And now they are in deep trouble because they have fixed defenses which were built for static sea level, not for a rising sea level. And they are going right now through a learning experience that we should skip over. We should not learn from their mistakes, which were well-intended and well-effective, when sea level rise was not an issue. Now, they come and learn from us how our communities respond. They have no plans for community response. It's all defense, defense, defense. And we have to learn from each other and find a middle way, how actually maybe use some defenses temporarily. And I can go into why I think barriers are a problem, because they will become ineffective roughly by the year 2100. so 50, 70 years into their useful time because of sea level rise, will make them obsolete because you have to get the Hudson water and the Raritan water and the Passaic River water out. If you have the barriers closed all the time, you pile up the water from behind. That's not smart. So you open the barriers. But if you open the barriers, the ocean comes in because it's a 5-6 feet higher ocean then. So the barriers are useless by then. So we have to do all the things that we should do now, what we would have to do then, and can almost use those $20, $40 billion, whatever it is, for barriers, for doing all the things that we need to do eventually anyhow. I'm not entirely sure that we should not think about barriers, but it's a temporary Band-Aid, and we have to live up behind the barriers anyhow to the fact that sea level is rising.
Jamie, are you going to chime in? Go.
I was going to just add one quick thing. And now I'll have to add an amendment. I was going to tell you, if it's any relief, that we do have some some representatives from the Netherlands. I think it's the Department of Spatial. They actually have a department called Water and Spatial Efficiency or something like this. That sounds like it makes a lot of sense. We have some representatives from them who are helping in the task force officially. On the other hand, it sounds like maybe that was a wasted effort. So.
No, you're going to be polite.
No.
But you just need to listen longer.
So we will have hopefully the benefit of both their experience and their learning, and in an effort to skip over the sort of the more arduous parts of that.
Okay, let's take a few more over here. Yeah.
Hi, my question is for Mr. Rubin. I'm a planner with one of the agencies you'll be working with. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on the timeline and process for how you'll coordinate with us.
Sure. Could I ask what agency you're with?
The MTA.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we've had an initial meeting with the MTA a few weeks ago as the task force. I mean, I should say the task force, there's a number of different levels. So the task force has had an initial meeting with the MTA. We may have to have another meeting with the MTA because the person we met with apparently resigned and now he's running for mayor. But
Yes, we're always the orphan.
It happens.
so we'll have another meeting with the MTA. And hopefully just one more. But we did have an initial meeting with the MTA. But I should say that the Department of Transportation at the federal level has already been working closely with the MTA, obviously, from time immemorial, and certainly right now at the the FTA and the FRA and so forth, to understand what their needs were, what your needs were, directly post Sandy, and wrap that into the Obama administration's request to Congress for money. Mm-hmm. So to that extent, of course, we're already closely working with you. Specifically with respect to the task force, we're going to focus with you and with your colleague agencies, the Port Authority and the LIRR and New Jersey Transit and so on understanding beyond your sort of traditional repair needs, what you might need resources to do by way of mitigation. Resilience, mitigation, adaptation, and preparing for the next set of storms. And that really is where our layer comes in. Much of what you have to do, of course, you know well. But so the process is one of ongoing engagement. We're going to be reaching out again quickly. We have some transportation experts who have just come on board. And I would imagine within the next couple of weeks, there'll be more in-depth discussions. Of course, it will help if we have some sense of how much money we have to work with and what restrictions might be placed on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to take the people that are at the mics now. You three, that's it. Klaus, did you want to jump in right now on something else, or should I go to the next question?
Well,
You're just getting ready. Because I'm happy.
It's almost that I wanted to ask back. So, what is the MTA doing? Because we did have a plan for the MTA. I mean, I worked for 3 years for pro bono on a plan for the MTA and lined out exactly the steps that they have to take to institutionally face up to this issue. And, the engineers there were sitting in the starting blocks to wait for the gun to go and do their job. But when it came to the leadership of the MTA, did the board of directors ever discuss that plan? Did they ever go to Albany and said we need $10 billion over X amount of time to fix the problem? I think it never reached this level. And so one has to ask, what is wrong with our institutions when the technical folks make recommendations and the leadership is preoccupied with day-to-day tasks to satisfy the public? And speaking of the public, don't clap yet. Don't clap yet. It will cost money, which means the subway riders will have to pay for it. Don't expect the upstate farmers to pay for it. Okay?
Okay.
We will have to pay for it.
Over here and then over here. Go ahead.
My name is Mike McDonald. I'm president of Global Health Initiatives, and I've been running the New York Resilience System, doing a lot of work in the inundation areas.
I read the New Yorker, I know who you are.
Okay. So I've been going into the big disaster areas over the last 12, 15 years all around the world. And I've been looking at these issues since the late 70s. You stated that well, if we look at the maps and we can see the inundation areas, you've basically stated that we've been acting with denial. What's the likelihood that we're actually going to do our planning retrospectively? So is it possible that we're actually going to have collapsing infrastructure and we'll try to stick it back in the box, but it won't? And we'll need to reframe with each disaster and replan, and that's the only time we're going to really act on our planning? Or are we really going to be proactive? And where are the precedents if we look at the disasters over the last 20 years in which we've truly been proactive on issues of climate change or economic decline? Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that briefly. My experience in working with natural disasters, and I've worked on natural disasters that includes floods, volcanic eruptions, debris flows, similar situation to what we have here. Geologists predict the hazard zones where the hazards are, but nothing seems to happen. We need an interdisciplinary approach where scientists are working alongside with social scientists, with politicians, with elected officials, in a way that the conversation involves the entire community. I mean, that's why I'm participating in these panels, to see that the same thing that's happened in other communities where the disaster happens and it rebuilt. I worked on a volcano in Colombia where the entire town has been destroyed, 30,000 people at least killed, the entire city destroyed 3 times since 1545, and the city is rebuilding. The question is what do we need to do so that the conversation moves forward and it isn't just a response to that last disaster, but is a real forward-looking? And that's why I think it has to be scientists participating with a much, much broader group to drive that conversation.
I'm actually more optimistic about that. If you look at success stories, look, for instance, what happened after the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco. They installed an ingenious water reservoir system so they would have water available, which in 1906 they would not have, that they did not have to fight fires. Look what happened after the Long Beach earthquake in California, in which a seismic building code was produced, which we finally, 15 years ago, adopted even in New York City. So a lot of positive things have come out, and they are an interesting amalgamations of economic interests, engineering interests, and scientific input. The same thing, we have a FEMA flood zone, which is the step in the right direction, but it's not enough. And the problem is that the FEMA flood zones have been used as planning tools. That's nonsense. They are based on the past. Planning means to look into the future. So the FEMA flood maps up to now, except lately in New Jersey,
Yes.
are devoid of any input of sea level rise. They look at a static world. We are not living in a static world. So to use FEMA flood zones for environmental impact statement for a new project that looks for 50, 100, for infrastructure 200 years into the future is absolutely incredible. We have to change our laws to make a new base for looking into the future. And I don't know how to say it over and over again. We are in total denial of the future. We only live in the present. We look at short-term gains. Developers build things on Rockaway because they hold the risk for 3, maybe 5 years while they're developing it. And then the owners will be one that have the risk for the rest of their life or ownership. We have not a political process to prevent this right now, or we have not the political will to prevent it right now.
Okay, I'm going to suggest you both just throw your questions out together, and then I'll have them respond. So what's yours?
Really quick segue. That's perfect. I am a homeowner on the Rockaway Peninsula. I'm 7 houses, well, now 6 from the ocean. And I'm very glad you came out to Rockaway, Dr. Jacob. It would have been nice to meet you, but the first obstacle is communication. So I didn't even know. I'm a civic leader, homeowners association, church leader, and I didn't even know you were coming to the Rockaways yesterday. So also it took me 2 hours. The transportation comments are very apt. 2 hours this morning to come on 1 bus and 1 train to Manhattan. So we have those major obstacles, but I was struck by the maps and the discussion about the sea level rise. And I know, because I live in the outer boroughs, that there's a Professor Nicholas Koch at, I believe, Queens College. He might even be in the room today, I don't know. But in the 80s, he was mapping the sea level rise and raising the alarm and going around and speaking at conferences all over the world about sea level rise and his predictions. So I guess people didn't really pay attention to him. I don't know why that is, but maybe because he's in the outer boroughs and it's not Manhattan's idea. Sorry, any comments on that?
Okay, and just go behind you. Let's hear yours as well.
Yeah, my name is Pat Simon, and I represent 10,000 residents who live in the Rockaway in public housing. A little tired this morning, so I see that gentleman. It looks like a wallet. The question is specifically for you. Okay, I'd really like to know who at New York City Housing Authority is participating on the task force. What's the specific tasks that the Housing Authority has on that task force to complete, as well as is there a representative from the housing developments, whether they're the leaders or representative of an agency representing them on your task force?
Okay, so a general question about, before you do, Jamie, let's deal with the first question as well. Just generally the perception in the Rockaways and how we get better communication. Does anybody want to throw anything in or just agree with the challenges that she identified? Okay, then do you want to deal with Pat's question then? Okay.
Sure. If I... A couple things, just strictly factual. It really is a federal, it's a very inclusive task force, but it is only a federal task force. So just to be clear, there isn't any representation on our task force of local bodies, with the exception of an advisory group that we're going to announce in a couple of weeks that will be most likely, Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Cuomo, Governor Christie, and perhaps a couple of others. That's a small subset, but you should, I will tell you, a major part of my life over the next 6 months is going to be to have a lot of interaction with people like the Housing Authority, for example, John Rhea and his people, and everybody responsible for the New York City public housing, as well as HUD subsidized housing, as well as any other public subsidized housing, to understand what their plans are for making sure that nothing like this happens again. And I can tell you, having spent my last 2 months not as a HUD employee, but I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 months walking around HUD and working with people at HUD in Washington, that there is, I would say, intense focus on how NYCHA responded and how NYCHA worked in the days and weeks following Sandy. And so to the extent that you're worried that that's not getting our focus, don't worry.
Well, I'll make sure you won't.
Okay, lots and lots of food for thought just in the beginning of the day for us to have a discussion with these three fellows. Thanks, gentlemen, very, very much for getting us started.